The Death Star was built as the Galactic Empire's ultimate weapon of terror. It embodied the Tarkin doctrine of ruling through fear. Its primary function was to destroy entire planets with a single shot. This was inspired by ancient Sith designs. The station was designed with the psychological aspect in mind, a weapon powerful and feared enough to keep the other systems in line without requiring a galactic senate. Palpatine had wanted the ultimate power for himself without the senate from the start, right after the declaration of the Empire. The Death Star was the tool to ultimately facilitate that. The plan of its construction was devised by Palpatine himself even before the Clone Wars. Project Celestial Power was the name of the Imperial program initiated to provide sustainable energy for worlds ravaged by the Clone Wars. In reality, the project's research was being used to build the super laser, a weapon that hadn't been seen ever before in this way. The guise of the energy program served the purpose to hide the Death Star's existence from the public, as well as from any other lower-ranked Imperials. They feared that if its existence had leaked before its completion, a rebellion might have started far earlier, and worlds would have turned on the Empire. The Death Star's first name, or rather its first design, was known as the Expeditionary Battle Planetoid. It was a ball-shaped station that should serve research purposes primarily. The final design was very different, though, from the planetoid. Raith Sinar was the first to come up with the concept of the Expeditionary Planetoid, but eventually abandoned the design. Palpatine saw its military potential and pushed the project forward secretly with a few trusted engineers and the Geonosians under Archduke Poggle the Lesser. The project was refined under Count Dooku's orders with the help of the Confederacy of Independent Systems. The Death Star was estimated to cost over 1 trillion credits to build. It was funded by the combined effort of the Techno Union, Banking Clan, Trade Federation, and the Galactic Republic. Development began in secret in the Geonosis system during the Clone Wars, while it was still raging. The first completed section was the primary equator trench. The first Death Star measured 120 kilometers in diameter. Engineers faced unprecedented logistical challenges due to the station's enormous size. Geonosis' asteroids were mined for raw materials. At the same time, several other worlds were being stripped of raw materials. Former battle droid factories were repurposed into refineries for the Death Star. Geonosian drones were used as labor force, although the Geonosians were happy to comply as their cultural instinct required them to work to feel happy and survive. Development and logistic plans were scattered across checkpoints and outposts in multiple systems to reduce intelligence leaks, and were all serving the big effort to keep the project a secret. The Death Star development was overseen by Orson Krennic, who held the title Director of Advanced Weapons Research. Only members of the Strategic Advisory Cell knew of the project, and all involved signed the Official Secrets Act. Notable members of the Strategic Advisory Cell included Grand Moff Wilhoff Tarkin, General Hurst Ramodi, Admiral Barton Coburn, and later on likely also Colonel Yularen and Major Leo Partagaz from the Imperial Security Bureau. The development teams were highly compartmentalized, with each team working on separate sectors like the super laser, power generator, hyperdrive, etc. Each team was completely unaware of what the other teams were working on and what their research's true purpose really served. Each department was assigned a cover name. The Super Lasers research team was codenamed Project Celestial Power, just like the Energy Research Program guys. The lead developer and researcher on the Super Laser was brilliant engineer and personal friend of Krennic called Galen Erso. Krennic didn't tell Galen what his research was truly for. Rather, Galen was working under the assumption that his research served the Empire's sustainable energy program. The Empire's new insignia, a deprivation of the Republic insignia, is introduced and said to be inspired by the Death Star's hypermatter reactor core. 4 Star Destroyers and 8 Imperial frigates guarded the station in orbit over Geonosis. Wookiees from Kashyyyk were enslaved on a wide scale to help construct the weapon. Prisoners like those seen on Narkina 5 were used as involuntary labor force as well. The systems the Empire created in the prisons were based on fear to keep the prisoners in line and keep them in line. Eventually, the project site was moved from Geonosis. The Empire wiped out almost all Geonosian life on the planet to keep the project secret. Only one queen survived, which can be seen being protected by Click-Clack in Star Wars Rebels. Construction moved from Geonosis to Seswena, then Patrim, then Horuz, and finally Despair. Scarif served as a backup data storage and prototype development facility. The original Death Star plans were also stored there in time. Gorman, a planet rich of deep substrate foliated calcite, was mined so severely that the planet's core was left unstable. The mineral was used to coat the reactor lenses of the Death Star and was absolutely essential. The Gorman massacre was the result of a calculated plan by the Empire. For 2 years, Imperial forces flooded the planet with propaganda, painting local resistance as a growing terrorist threat. The ISB quietly provoked unrest, pushing small acts of defiance into open rebellion. When citizens gathered for a protest outside the governmental plaza, Imperial troops opened fire. Dozens were killed. It was all to create a justification to invade the planet and relocate its population in order to mine the calcite. A breakthrough came with hypermatter energy science and kyber crystal experimentation to construct a beam powerful enough to destroy planets. Kyber crystal experimentation can be seen as early as in the Clone Wars, but for the Death Star, several smaller crystals were used as the big ones were extremely rare and most of them got destroyed. Jedha and Elam were the main planets being mined for kyber crystals. The project took a total of 23 years to complete. Delays were caused mainly by the temporary loss of Galen Erso, who found out about the true purpose of his kyber crystal research. The constant delays caused major friction within the Empire high-ranking members as different systems and rebel cells were starting to stand up against them, and they saw the Death Star as the tool to silence any opposition. Major Leo Partagaz said that Death Star was quite a prescient term of phrase to describe the station, as it was going to bring about the death of millions. Its official name was DS-1 Orbital Battle Station. Final construction was eventually completed on the prison world Despair. Whispers of the station's existence eventually got out days before the completion of the station, mainly due to an overambitious ISB supervisor called Dedra Miro. She had gathered intel in private from several different sectors, and eventually connected the dots that the compartmentalized researchers were working on a battle station. The information was stolen from her by a rebel spy in the ISB and forwarded to the Rebel Alliance. Acting on this intel, the rebellion decided to seek out Galen Erso and take measures to get the Death Star plans on Scarif. Major Partagaz and Dedra Miro were punished for their failure to keep the station secret, resulting in the suicide of the former and the imprisonment of the latter. The station simulated a planet's gravitational field due to its enormous mass. The Superstar Destroyer Executor got pulled into it during the Battle of Andor after its command bridge got destroyed. The main hull was constructed from quadanium steel. The station was divided into 2 hemispheres separated by one big equatorial trench. Internally, it was split into 24 zones, 12 per hemisphere. These zones were further organized into specialized sectors like command, military, or technical. For hyperspace travel, the stations used a complex web of 123 hyperdrive field generators synchronized through a central navigation matrix. The station carried over 15,000 laser and ion batteries to defend itself against enemy cruisers and fighters, although the cannons weren't very effective against small single-man starfighters. The Death Star had 768 tractor beam projectors for capturing enemy ships. It featured at least 327 docking bays, which were all positioned along the main equatorial trench. The Millennium Falcon used Bay 327 in A New Hope. It was powered by a hypermatter reactor burning with the intensity of stars. The reactor also took up a big amount of space on the station in the center of it. Traveling in the Death Star between the sections was done with turbolifts, which were capable of horizontal and vertical travel. A large complement of different droids like astromechs handled technical maintenance. RA-7 protocol droids, also referred to as Death Star droids, were also widely seen and handled data tasks. MSE-6 mouse droids cleaned, made simple repairs, and delivered messages across the station. Each mouse droid was designed with a single specialized function, but when working together, they could tackle more complex tasks. It wasn't uncommon to see chains of these droids moving in lines, guiding troops through the Death Star's complex layout. Around 1.2 million permanent crew personnel served aboard the station. 342,953 were part of the Imperial Navy and Army, so pilots and members of the Imperial garrison. 25,984 were part of the Stormtrooper Corps. The rest of the crew comprised of various technical workers, officers, engineers, or gunners. Elite Death Star troopers piloted the station and operated its main weapon. The Death Star gunner can be seen with a specialized helmet on several occasions. Garbage chutes automatically sorted the different waste directly into different trash compactors. The trash compactor creature that attacked Luke, Leia, Han, and Chewbacca was a Dianoga. Its name was Omi, and it was handed to a few Imperials en route to the Death Star, who, in turn, decided to dump it into the Death Star's trash compactor. There, Omi fed on some of the life forms that occasionally made their way into her trash compactor. She was also Force-sensitive, and a story in the EU says that the reason she let go of Luke was that she could sense that Luke was destined for greatness, and thus let him go. The station had an emergency air dump system to counter any potential bio-attacks. It also included small parks, shops, and recreational centers to keep the crew's morale up, as most crew members were said to be stationed on the station for years on end. The main social spot was the Hard Heart Cantina. There, the crew could get cocktails and other beverages for off-time activity, though the drinks were said to be rather bad. Sadly, no Cuba Libres for them, huh? Alderaan was the only planet to be completely annihilated by the Death Star. A moon called Garrison Moon close to the planet Kessel was also destroyed when testing the super laser. The Death Star laser's power was adjustable. It could also target smaller capital ships as seen in the Battle of Endor and destroy planetary surfaces without completely annihilating the entire planet, as seen on Jedha and Scarif. Each shot with the main Death Star laser required 24 hours of recharging. The second Death Star reduced the recharge time to 3 minutes. Jedha's city destruction was the first successful test of the fully operational battle station. The blast left the moon fractured, although still intact. Imperial propaganda portrayed Jedha's destruction as a mining accident to hide the Death Star from the public. Scarif's destruction, in turn, was blamed on the Rebel fleet's attack, which resulted in these measures that the Empire had to take. Director Krennic, who had dedicated his entire life toward the development of the station, is killed by it on Scarif. The last thing he witnesses is the Death Star laser coming towards him. Alderaan's destruction killed over 2 billion people, and was meant to demonstrate the Empire's power to the galaxy and crush any rebellion. Survivors that were off-world at the time of Alderaan's destruction used the destroyed debris to build memorials. It further galvanized systems into rebellion. The Empire sent debris from Alderaan to other planets to intimidate them. The Death Star trench run occurred at the North Polar region of the station. The thermal exhaust port led directly to the reactor. The flaw was built in deliberately by Galen Erso. One blast to the reactor module would lead to a chain reaction that would result in the whole station's destruction. K2SO says it best during Rogue One.
One blast to the reactor module and the whole system goes down. That's how you said it. The whole system goes down.
Get to work fixing their comms!
The second Death Star intended to fix this issue by using millions of microvents instead of one exhaust port. The first Death Star's destruction killed about 750,000 personnel, including several high-ranking officials like Grand Moff Tarkin, Wolf Yularen, and several other admirals and generals. Darth Vader was held personally accountable by the Emperor for the Death Star's destruction. He was temporarily demoted and challenged by Palpatine with several life-threatening challenges to regain his status again. The destruction of the first Death Star at Yavin marked a major turning point in the Galactic Civil War. Imperial cohesion collapsed. Pirates and crime surged with no Senate or Death Star to enforce law. The second Death Star was already planned before the destruction of the first one, but officially began construction shortly after the Battle of Yavin. The second Death Star measured 160 kilometers in diameter. It was built at a very fast pace compared to the first one, as there were no research delays anymore, and all mines and resources had already been gathered for the construction of the first one. The Empire even had plans to mass-produce the design and had droids and workforce in place for it, although the construction of the second station was still in a delayed state at the time of the Battle of Endor. The destruction of the incomplete second Death Star and the death of the Emperor led to the collapse of the Empire built by Palpatine. Han Solo joked during the Yuuzhan Vong invasion that the galaxy could use a Death Star right about now against these invaders from another galaxy. The only written English in Star Wars can be seen during A New Hope, referring to the tractor beams. This was later changed to Arabic with the special editions. Luke mentions a prison transfer from Cell Block 1138, which references George Lucas's first film, THX 1138. The number can be seen in several other scenes, as well as an Easter egg like on Bush's helmet on the side. Early designs of the Death Star placed its superlaser at the equator instead of the northern hemisphere. A concept of that can still be seen when the rebels talk about the Death Star plans, and it always struck me as odd when watching the movies. The trash compactor scene used real trash and was filled with knee-deep water to film it. The actors said that the smell got pretty bad eventually as the water got old. Peter Mayhew in his Chewbacca costume was especially unfond of the scene as water stuck to the fur suit and thus kept the smell of the trash compactor. Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher made fun of George Lucas by picking up a piece of the trash in the compactor and saying, "Pardon me, George, could this be Dianoga poo-poo?" Lucas was said to not be amused. The comlink C-3PO uses on the Death Star to communicate with the gang in the trash compactor was a one-of-a-kind prop, as it wasn't planned to be in the scene. It was a filter from a random pipe, and it was lost after that shooting day, never to be found again. In late 2012, a petition was submitted to the White House urging the U.S. government to build a real Death Star as a jobs program, gaining over 25,000 signatures and prompting an official response. The White House rejected the proposal, citing the astronomical cost of over $852 quadrillion. Also, it would take 833,000 years to gather enough steel to even begin construction. In response to the White House's rejection, the official Star Wars blog released a playful in-universe rebuttal from the Galactic Empire, with figures like Admiral Motti and Governor Tarkin mocking Earth's leaders for their exaggerated cost estimate and lack of industrial capacity. The Death Star has 3 big LEGO UCS sets currently, with a 4th one being on the way this year in 2025. 2 of them are pretty much identical playsets, and the second Death Star model is one of the most expensive LEGO sets on the secondary market. The new Death Star to release in fall 2025 is said to be the biggest LEGO set ever made up till this point. Even my mom, who has no clue about Star Wars might I add, knows of the Death Star's existence, making it one of the biggest cultural phenomena of our time.